Hey there, folks. Welcome back to the Dale King Show. I'm your host, Dale King, and today we have an incredible guest in the house. So let me introduce you to Jamie Perry. Now, Jamie is a licensed master social worker and currently working in human services here in the Treasure Valley, Idaho area. Jamie, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. So tell me, how did you get started with social work and what your career is now?
So I'm currently working in mental health, providing therapy to folks here in the Treasure Valley. And I started in social work, really just wanting to work with people. So that's was kind of my mindset, is just helping people understand who they are and uh, really just live a better life.
You weren't always in social work. What would you
Yeah.
do really before and really during?
Yeah, so I helped run a construction company here in the Treasure Valley for several years, which included, in construction, it can include everything. So in a day, it could be doing payroll, being on the job, or going and getting materials, and at the same time managing like children and then I started into my education. So then it included education as well and going to school. Um,
Right.
So it's been a big part of my life.
Well, we're going to talk a bit about life balance here a little bit later on, but well, I think it's interesting. I wanted to bring that up because you have an interesting dual career, and what are some of
Okay.
the challenges you've faced in your business life, and how'd you overcome them?
So in business, and especially, 2006 on in construction, business was all about relationship. A lot of times we stayed busy because of relationship. And so that was really an important piece of understanding how to work with people, how to respond to conflict, whether it be with employees or with other contractors or, um, with supervisors on the job. So, um, I don't know any challenge that came up. It always came back to how are, how would we as a company, uh, navigate this, because you want a good reputation. When you have the pressure of seeing your friends who are also contractors losing their business, in really difficult times, it's like everything matters. So relationship mattered a lot, so it's how do we finesse this so we do get the bid? What makes us different? It really came down to identity, and as a business, it was quality. We have to do quality work. We can't do cheap work. And so we also had to identify, that removed actually a lot of conflict in the valley because there was just so many contractors, so much competition. And when work started to dry up, it came down to relationship,
Right.
and then it came down to identity as a company. Who are we? Are we looking to get a massive bid and do fast, not as high quality work? Or are we looking for the larger job, you know, that has all of its own issues that we have to overcome,
Right.
but it's a
Right.
quality work and we would be known for quality, and that's what we chose at the time. So
I want to bring that up because now I want you to talk about your background and the education that's required to be a social worker. And what is a social worker? How do you quickly define that in one sentence?
so a social worker is taught how to look at the person in their environment. So we're taught not to just look at how do I counsel someone through a specific just issue, but more along the lines of what does this person have going on in their life that's causing the issue, because it's could be a few different areas that they're needing help with versus just the one that they think is going wrong. So it's helping that person to understand themselves in the environment that they're living in.
And there's this one area that I was kind of intrigued to talk to you about, and that is that lingering childhood trauma. And we've talked a little bit about, some of the difficulties that we have. Say we get into our 30s, and it's like, man, I've been, I'm through school, I'm through training, I'm in my career, I'm in full stride, but I have these things that seem like they just kind of hang on and I can't get past. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I mean, developmentally, we think of human development, and a lot of people think that that ends with maybe high school or something, or like you turn 18, you're an adult. So adult just encompasses, from 18 to 90. But actually we continue to go through stages of development as we grow in age. And the 30s and 40s, a lot of people hit a space where they're not as sped up, they're more conscious. They're looking at their identity, they're looking at their habits, they're looking at everything that they do. And it's like, why do I do these things? And a lot of people, they already have their careers or their businesses, and those things are starting to trip them up because they don't have the capacity to move forward anymore. We don't have, you get in your 30s and 40s and you don't have that idea that like um I'm limitless, you start to realize your limits. Um, and so yeah, so I think um in that developmental stage, a lot of people will hit kind of a wall, whether it's in their business or in their personal lives. And it's under they have to come back to what's my identity? Who
Right.
am I? And I would say for business, um right. It's all of, it's so sorry, you asked about lingering childhood trauma. Man, the 30s and 40s, that stuff starts to come out if it hasn't been uh
Right.
appropriately processed, appropriately like refiled, right? It happened as a child. A lot of times people will kind of put it on on a shelf emotionally and mentally, and then it starts to when we start to hit that wall in our 30s and 40s, and we're trying to understand what is going on, and it's that childhood trauma. If it's lingering, there is
Right.
usually the answer, right? It could be other things, but that's one thing that can come up. And that's the time people will come in and they're like, I can't move into this next area of my business, I keep hitting a wall, what's going on? Well, let's
Right.
dig into that. What's happening in your thought life, right? What's happening in your habits, that kind of thing.
Well, and I think it surprises people because I've seen this, and just being in business and being out there with folks and observing people getting a little bit older than the people in their 20s and 30s, and even a little bit older than people in their 40s.
Mhm.
You can look back and you can observe some things that I probably didn't see. I'm sure I didn't see,
Mhm.
when I was in my 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
And so what I found is it seemed like our 30s and 40s, we've really got our feet under us, but now we've our increased our responsibilities. We have families, we have a life partner, we're moving forward and building, but like you're talking about with potential, things that are tripping us up. It's like, what are these things? And it's intriguing to me. I've heard very, very successful CEOs, for example, talk
Mhm.
about, you know, paying a lot of money every month for a coach,
Mhm.
uh, because that coach helps them to zero in on their priorities that they've set
Mhm.
and keep them on track and actually bring in significant more money because they're staying on track.
Right.
And so it's like they put up their own guardrails, um,
Mhm.
to stay on the course and to be effective.
Mhm.
And it's almost like a humility to just say, I need some help here because I know where I
Right.
want to go, but I'm getting some things happening in my personal life I don't understand, but I'm not breaking through and asking for help. And so
Right.
I'm talking about that because your your background in social work is really intriguing to me because you're talking about knowing the person and
Mhm.
understanding the person within their environment.
Mhm.
And so I would like to hear you talk about that some more in regards to working with professionals in a corporate coaching environment.
Yeah, so in a professional coaching environment, I mean, I think I just kind of go back to my own experience as, trying to build a construction company. Those things came up, you know, why is it so hard to think of myself of, you know, adding a few zeros to this job and being able to, number one, do that large of a project, and number two, receive the payout from that project, right? Like, what is that thing
Right.
that's holding me back in this? So that could just be thought patterns from just regular thought patterns from the home we were raised in or whatever. But some of it too can stem from, any kind of traumatic home life, right? That really starts to cloud that thinking of a and those are those glass ceilings that we put over
Right.
ourselves,
Right.
I'm my family doesn't do that. My family doesn't do X, Y, and Z. Or I've never, the key one is I've never been that big before. I've never done that great of a thing before. It's all in
Right.
those just really like simple thought patterns, but it's a glass ceiling when we think like that. And so it's really just kind of coming into that space of how come you could build up to this point, but you can't build to this other point, the next level,
Right.
whatever that is. And so sometimes it's really helpful to kind of hire a brain, right? An outside person to be able to look in to your environment and help walk you through that process of like, this is what you're not seeing because it
Right.
gets so cloudy. We don't see it ourselves,
Right.
so that's where that coach or mentor or even if it is like lingering stuff that's still traumatic and it's harder to get through like that than maybe therapy. So yeah.
Yeah, I keep thinking about something I've noticed, and I don't have the answer. Maybe you can help me. But something I've seen with leaders that are very good leaders, they're very proficient, they're excellent, really, at getting it done. But when leaders are emerging, I mean, people that have qualities of leadership, they're more mature in their profession than maybe what they're used to having in their company. And
Mhm.
I've seen these remarkable leaders not be able to really lead them well. And it seems to me that they were really good at minimum wage employees.
Right.
But when a leader is emerging in their ranks, they stumble and they don't understand that you have to work with people differently with where they're at. And it's disappointing to me because I see these people that are really great leaders, but they can't see it. They just don't, they blame other people and they pass on the responsibility to what's happening in the environment, or the relationships or the organization in general. But it's like, but you're not letting, you're not giving up control of
Right.
your company. You're meddling in your company. You're meddling in the affairs of the people you've hired to do a job. Um,
Right.
and so anyways, can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah. So I think in leadership, right, that personal and professional development, it's so finely nuanced. Like, what's the difference between
Mm,
personal development and professional development? And really it matters that both are increasing at the same time. I think as a leader, you have to embrace emotional intelligence and you have to raise yours first before you can expect someone else to raise in theirs. And part of that is understanding, your identity and your personal capacity, right? Okay, so if I'm leading a company and I don't know how to handle an emerging leader, then really I'm a supervisor.
right,
I'm gonna go manage the people that are under me. Because I can't handle someone that might challenge me. I can't handle someone that, that's what someone that can't handle emerging leaders, they can't handle the challenge. So it comes back to also relationship. What
right,
does that what do what and reputation and all those things, like how do you want to move forward? And you have to keep sight of that all the time. You
right.
can't, it's managing your capacity, managing your identity, what are your values, and rising up in that space. Um,
The
and taking feedback.
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I was thinking about the culture aspect of that because leaders set the culture. So if
Right.
there's a contentious culture, if there's a lot of um, backbiting or
Mhm.
blame shifting and things like that, that leader gets to define that. And I've
Mhm.
seen leaders that were excellent leaders, and it's really an excellent environment. And I've seen leaders that were criminal, literally,
Yeah.
um, and the
Yeah.
environment reflected that. And
Right.
so, yeah, that's a thanks for talking through that a little bit. It's an interesting thing. I'm intrigued with that training you have that really helps and has honed your skills because I know that your therapy career has so much structure, so much accountability. I know you're always studying, you're going for another certification, you're finishing some things up there, but you're under supervision, so you're not only in the field. You not only have studied for 6 years, but
Mhm.
you've been through hours and hours and hours of supervision as well. And so you're
Right.
not just a rogue out there on your own, just you giving analysis of different things. People are talking with you about your practices and how you're working, and then you come into a world of coaching that doesn't have all those guardrails.
Right.
And so you've already got the personal discipline and the understanding to where you can use those tools in an environment that doesn't have the guardrails.
Right.
And it's really exciting to me because I know professionals that could use a little bit of help here and there. And not a lot of help necessarily, but they've
Right.
got an area in their life they would love a little bit of help on. And it sounds like you could help them.
Yeah. No, I do. I genuinely enjoy helping people. And it comes back to that space of understanding that I mean, I think some of the best advice I was given in business is to hire a brain and understand that you need that.
Right.
So that's that introspection, that growing your emotional intelligence, understanding your own identity and capacity, and knowing when to hire a brain. And
Right.
sometimes it's just someone else to be able to stand on the outside of you and look in and see, okay, this is the hang up. This is what I'm not able to clearly see myself.
Right.
And yeah, I think in business that should be a lifelong. I think in business, right, it comes back to professional and personal
Right.
development. Really, what's the difference? It should be a lifelong endeavor to learn as much as you can about yourself because people see you when you're leading. People see who you are. They can like it or leave it or whatever. But if you're wanting to build something that's meaningful and lifelong, your identity carries with you. You have to be
Right.
confident in that. And so um you don't just know who you are in your 20s and then that's it, right? That you have to constantly reassess, like, what's going on with me? What's this
Right.
thing that I'm not seeing? So
No, it's funny you talk about being in our 20s. In some ways, I still feel like a 20-year-old,
right. No, I get it. Me too.
but in other ways, it's like, man, I'm so glad I'm not 20.
Yes,
So, and
absolutely.
yeah, I loved being 20, but I'm not that same person. I'm very different.
Very different.
Um, but okay, so this is the opportunity you have now is your vision for the future, and this is your chance to give us some hope for the future of relationships and whatnot in the professional arena. And what do you see for the future?
Um, well, I think for the future, I think as a species, as a group, as a community, whatever, I think everyone's wanting to do relationship better. I think
Yeah,
that's becoming more of a mindset of instead of being mad around whatever things that have been said, or this person said this, or they believe this, or whatever. I think we're striving to understand one another better. I do see that. And it could be in business, marriage, life partner, parent-child relationships, anything, friendships. And I think that's important because
right,
yeah, I just think that is where we have to land because there are things that go on in around us that we need each other for. Despite whatever conflict we had with one another, there's got to be a way to come forward. And I think more and more people are wanting to understand, how do I conflict better? because
Right.
conflict happens, right? It's going to happen whether you're in business or in your house or with your 2-year-old, conflict happens, right? So how do we figure out how to do that better and come through it with a richer
Right.
and deeper relationship? So,
No,
yeah.
that's really good. I think I'm seeing that too. Um, and just the whole idea of emotional intelligence and that being given credence,
Mhm.
and it's important. And then even measurements that are being made in business on ROI on emotional intelligence within a company.
Mhm.
And there's just an elevation of the need for good relationships and understanding values and how leaders set cultures. So this has
Mhm.
been really interesting. So our last question, my last question for you is, what advice would you give to young people who want to make a positive impact?
My advice would be, raising your emotional intelligence is always going to come back to you understanding your own identity. And, you know, I think I think it's really easy to come out of, the first 18 years of life and not have a solid foundation in uh a person's own identity, their value structure, their morals, why they believe the way they believe, which all, creates our habits and the make frames up our choices
Right.
that we do. And so the advice I would give them is to seek out their understanding themselves first,
Hmm.
helps them to understand others
Right. Right.
and and you know yeah, so and I think it's comes down to the relationships are important, and figuring if once you understand yourself, it's and you've given yourself all that grace and mercy and everything,
Right.
it's easy then to give that to someone else and come through conflict or whatever is going on in a
Right.
relationship.
No, that's really good. That's really good. And I think I'm seeing some young people really like dialing into that. And so
Mhm.
that's really good. So now before we wrap up, how does someone get a hold of you and work with you?
Yeah, so I'm currently working at Syringa Wellness in the Caldwell area. So that's how they would get a hold of me.
Great. Well, Jamie, this has been really a fantastic conversation. Now, folks, well, that's it for this episode of the Dale King Show. I know you love the show, so be sure and hit the like button. If you have any questions, feedback, or opinions to share, comment below. And if you know someone who would benefit from this, please share it. All right, we'll see you soon.